What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to continue our coverage over the reign of X era of X-Men comics, where we basically pick up with X Factor number 7 and X Factor number 8. Yes, we are going to cover another 2 issues in today's video for the reign of X era. Now, with that being said, with X Factor number 7 and 8, it basically continues the idea of X Factor trying to figure out what in the world is going on with Siren. Remember, Siren is the daughter of Banshee, and Banshee is an old X-Men character. Matter of fact, when Chris Claremont took over the X-Men title back in 1975, Banshee was one of the characters that joined the new X-Men team. Now, with that being said, his daughter has the same ability as he does, meaning that she can basically scream to kind of help her fly and glide across areas. And so with that, right now they're trying to figure out what in the world is going on with Siren, because she has died multiple times in a matter of weeks. Maybe just 2 weeks, and that is it. And the thing is, how she dies is weird, because a lot of times when she dies, it's just her crash landing to the ground dying. And of course, it's weird because she's a character that can fly. And so right now it's X Factor wondering what in the world is going on. At the same time, they still have other problems to deal with, because their team is a very, not a massive team, but a very complex team. Now, we actually do pick up with X Factor number 7, and we actually pick up with Prodigy. Now, Prodigy right now is freaking out, because we kind of find out that basically he has a boyfriend, and his boyfriend is Speed. Now, remember, Speed is one of the twins of the Scarlet Witch. And basically, Speed is, of course, Prodigy's boyfriend. But the reason why you have Prodigy kind of freaking out right now, because Speed is asking Prodigy how he died. Because remember, the X-Men have the ability now to bring almost anybody back to life. Well, really make you a clone body and download your memories into that clone body. But the thing is, Prodigy was one of the characters that was brought back to life, because Prodigy died a long time ago, basically when the one operation attacked the school and killed a bunch of children. And so with that, Prodigy was one of the kids that was killed off. And so you have Prodigy telling Speed, his boyfriend, yes, I was brought back to life because I died years ago. Are you happy? The problem is, though, the reason why Speed was calling Prodigy so many times is because Speed wants to tell Prodigy, you did not die that night, meaning that you were brought back to life without any kind of proof that you actually died. Because the night you supposedly had died, you were with me, and we were basically making out in the club. Meaning that there could be another Prodigy out there who's just living a normal life. And this Prodigy is just a clone body of Prodigy that was made on accident. Because when it comes to the 5, the ones who make the clone bodies, they want proof that a person had died before they make a new version of that person, so that you don't have 2 of them out there in the world. But right now it sounds like there is 2 Prodigies out there in the world. Now, we actually do pick up with the character known as Daken. Now, remember, Daken or Daken is actually the son of Wolverine. Now, of course, by this point, Daken or Daken, however you want to pronounce it, is part of the X Factor team. And so by this point in Marvel Comics, he is a good guy. Because when Daken first appeared, he was a bad guy. But now he is basically a good guy. Now, of course, throughout the entire X Factor series, we have been watching Daken falling in love with Aurora. And remember, Aurora is the twin sister, or just the sister of Northstar. And Northstar is the leader of the X Factor team. But of course, Northstar is watching Daken very closely, because he wants to make sure that Daken does not break the heart of his sister. Because remember, when X Factor came together, they were trying to figure out who in the world killed Aurora. Now, of course, they never had figured out who did that in this series, but of course they figured out she did die, and so that they were able to bring her back to life. But either way, it's Northstar being more protective over his sister because of that moment. So even though he believes that Dakin has changed and gotten better and could be a good guy now, it's still him protecting his sister from the possibility of dying again. But it was also Northstar getting Dakin ready for his next mission, which is to basically tell Siren, because Siren has been dying a lot. And of course, they're trying to figure out why is she dying so much? Who is killing her, or why is she killing herself? Like, what is the whole deal with Siren dying so many times? And so basically, Dakin has been following her around town. Now, of course, Dakin does call up the X Factor team, and he does give them updates on what's going on with Siren. Now, Dakin calls up Polaris and tells Polaris about what is happening. Here's the thing though, Polaris lies to her team about what Dakin tells her, because remember, we saw that basically Polaris has been taken over by Siren, and so right now Polaris is basically working for Siren. And so anytime Dakin gives Polaris any kind of information, it's false information. And so you have Eyeboy, a character who has a bunch of eyes all over his body. One of his eyes is able to detect when someone is lying. And so, of course, he realized that Polaris is lying for some strange reason. And for Eyeboy, it makes no sense on why in the world she will lie about the intel that Dakin's giving them to her. Now, you do have this brief moment in the book where you basically have Speed run into Northstar, as Speed is kind of sneaking out of the room of Prodigy, because Prodigy does not want anyone to know that basically him and Speed are dating. And so he's trying to sneak Speed out, but of course Speed runs into Northstar. Now, Speed used to be classified as a mutant because the Scarlet Witch was also a mutant, but Speed is no longer a mutant because Scarlet Witch is no longer a mutant. But either way, you do have Speed run into Northstar, and Speed is a huge fan of Northstar because Northstar is a speedster just like Speed. The problem is though, Northstar is very fast, faster than Speed, so fast that basically Northstar is the fastest mutant on the world. That's what Northstar says his own self. But either way, you also have Northstar tell Speed that basically Northstar can fly. And so it's kind of like Northstar just meeting a huge fan, and the story does move on from that point. Now, here comes the weird part about Polaris, because while you have the X Factor team right now going around questioning different people who are basically close to Siren, you do have Dakin trying to call up Polaris to give Polaris updates on Siren, because he's been telling her all over the place. But every time he tries to call up Polaris, Polaris doesn't answer at all. And that right there is very huge. Now, with that being said, you also have every single person who's a close friend of Siren talking to X Factor, kind of mentioning the same thing, that basically nothing seems weird about Siren, just the idea of her dying so many times over the last couple weeks. Now, this is where things get even crazier, because while you have Dakin continue to follow Siren, you have the X Factor team meeting up and trying to figure out what in the world is still going on with Siren. But here comes the problem though. When the X Factor team split up earlier to go to talk to different people that were basically close to Siren, of course, one of the people was supposed to be Polaris and Rachel Summers. The problem was though, Polaris never did link up with Rachel Summers. Polaris went on her own to talk to one of the people that was close to Siren. And so when Rachel Summers walks into the room, she had no idea that basically the X Factor team has been working on the case of Siren. And that right there is huge, because then you have Polaris begin to lie and say, no, Rachel, you and I were together earlier, remember? But of course, Eyeboy, one of his eyes, is able to detect when somebody is lying. And so you basically have Eyeboy tell the X Factor team that Polaris is lying. And so, of course, you basically have Rachel Summer read Polaris' mind to find out that she is being controlled by a character known as the Morrigan. And I really hope I pronounced that correctly. But either way, though, Morrigan is one of those old Marvel characters. And basically the character has a lot of origins, and one of her origins is that she kind of represents death and battle, or she is another version of death. Now, with that being said, it's basically a being that is able to possess other people by jumping over to body. And basically this being has been jumping over to body with Siren. So every time Siren dies but is brought back to life, you have the Morrigan just jump into the new body of Siren. And so earlier in our last video, Morrigan did kind of take over the body of Polaris. Now, Rachel Summers was able to realize that. She tells the X Factor team, and that tells Northstar that basically Dakin has been following Siren, and that him following Siren was a trap. And so you have Northstar run over to where Dakin is at to find Dakin basically almost beaten to death. Like Dakin almost died by the hands of Siren, who have been possessed by the Morrigan. And so now the X Factor team knows what in the world is going on with Siren. Now, this is where you can basically say the writing was on the wall when it came to basically the X Factor book. And what I mean is that X Factor was canceled literally 3 books after this one right here. And so with that, you have X Factor trying to wrap everything up in a nice little bow, because the last issue is basically a tie-in to the Hellfire Gala event. And so with that, they have to wrap up the storyline with this book right here, the next one, and also issue number 9. But with that being said, we actually do pick up with Dakin once again right now, just taking a bath as a way to kind of heal his body up, because Dakin does have a healing factor like his father, Wolverine, Logan. But of course, it's not as, I want to say his is not as strong as Logan, or his is stronger than Logan. I'm trying to remember. But either way, though, basically he is getting healed up. Now he is confronted by Aurora, and once again, it's just X Factor continuing the idea of having these two relationship grow to hopefully make something big between these two characters, because these two characters do like each other a lot. And I mean a lot. But then the ending of issue number 7 is very huge, because basically we actually pick up with a huge time jump. Not a huge one, but like a couple hours, where basically somebody has begun the process of actually attacking the Boneyard, the base of the X Factor team. And right now, most of the characters of the X Factor team are to be believed to be dead. Only 3 characters are left, and those 3 characters are Dakin, Prodigy, and also iBoy. And so right now, the 3 characters must work together to figure out who killed the rest of the team, basically right now in the Boneyard. Now, when we actually pick up with X Factor number 8, it's basically the book that tells us what happened before the ending of the last chapter, where of course everybody else in the Boneyard was killed except Prodigy, iBoy, and Dakin. Where of course we pick up with Dakin and Aurora continuing the idea of these two characters basically becoming a couple, which honestly, that has been the trend this entire series. But either way, it's just one more page to remind us like, hey, these two characters, they really do like each other, but of course they're taking it very, very slow. But right after that, we basically do pick up with iBoy. Now remember, iBoy's body is basically covered in eyes, but each eye has the ability to do something different. And that right there is very huge, because when Rachel Summers finds Eye-Boy right now is basically freaking out and standing in the middle of the boneyard, and he's scared. He is literally freaking out. But the reason why he is freaking out, because with one of his eyes, he basically saw something. He saw something crawling through the boneyard in the shadows. And of course, it scared him a lot. And he knows something bad was about to happen in the boneyard because that one eye was able to show him what was crawling in the boneyard. But then we actually pick up with Prodigy. Now, right now, you have Prodigy looking over the photo that basically he saw earlier when Speed came by to the boneyard. Now, remember, that photo is basically talking about the idea that there could be two Prodigies out there in the world, because when it came to Prodigy being brought back to life, the only reason why he was brought back to life because there was a point in X-Men comics where a bunch of kids were killed, and Cyclops told the Five when they were bringing back characters who had died in the past that Prodigy was one of the characters that had died. But that photo that Speed had basically said no. Prodigy never died. That basically Prodigy was with me the entire time. And so it was right now playing with the idea that there could be two Prodigies in the world. The one we saw in the old X-Men comic days and the one we have right now in X Factor. But of course, with Prodigy, he began to study the photo. And when he does, he was able to figure out that this photo was basically Photoshop. Someone is trying to play games with Prodigy. But then we actually pick up with Daken in the bath right now, relaxing. Now, this is the moment where we basically pick up where X Factor number 7, the last chapter in our video, kind of left off at before that huge time jump, where of course we saw Daken and Aurora in the tub together, kind of taking a bath together as a way to build that bond even tighter. But of course, we come to find out that was never Aurora at all. That basically we're left to believe that the Morrigan has basically invaded the boneyard and has in the process of taking over different characters in the X Factor building, starting with Aurora. Because while you have Dick in the bath with Aurora thinking that it's actually her, it's not her, and she begins to attack Daken's mind. Now, of course, you have Daken being able to break free, but when he does, he realized that he was never with Aurora. And that right there tells Daken he has to warn the others. And so that leads into the moment where you have Eye-Boy right now hiding out in his bedroom because he was able to see the Morrigan earlier with one of his eyes. And so right now, of course, he's freaking out because he realized that basically right now the Morrigan, the being that the X Factor team was trying to stop, has basically invaded the boneyard. And so right now you have him freaking out because right now she's going around trying to find each member of the X Factor team to kill them off. Now that is the moment you do have Eye-Boy luckily be saved by Daken. But here comes the big problem though, because right as soon Daken finds Eye-Boy, you have the Morrigan basically attack both Daken and Eye-Boy. Now, of course, Daken and Eye-Boy are able to get away. But with this happening right now, it does pick up right where X Factor number 7 left off. And so right now, technically, we have caught up into the present day. But with that being said, you do have Daken tell the team, well, really, him and Prodigy and Eye-Boy, that right now they are the only 3 characters left as a way to stop the Morrigan from killing off anybody else on the island. And so, of course, they basically need to make a plan to stop her before she's actually able to escape. Now, you basically do have Eye-Boy and also Prodigy and Daken as well examine the body of both Northstar and Aurora. Because while you have most of the X Factor team killed off, the way Northstar and Aurora left behind after being killed off, basically tells Prodigy, also Eyeboy and Dakin, that this was some kind of ritual. That basically right now, the Morrigan was using Northstar and Aurora for some kind of ritual because those two characters are siblings. Now, Prodigy, remember, when it comes to Prodigy, he is able to understand almost anything he studies. So basically, if he wants to learn something, he's able to actually learn it and understand it very well at a very fast pace. And so right now it's him trying to figure out what kind of ritual was done on Northstar and Aurora that the Morrigan was trying to do. But of course, you have the Morrigan beginning to attack Eyeboy, Prodigy, and Dakin. And so you have Dakin tell Eyeboy and Prodigy to escape because right now Prodigy is the only hope they have to figure out how in the world they can actually stop the Morrigan. But here comes the thing though. As soon as you have Eyeboy and Prodigy try to escape, Dakin is basically butchered by the Morrigan. So he's basically killed off. But of course, we're left to believe that Eyeboy and Prodigy were able to actually escape. Now, you do have X-Factor basically be brought back to life because remember, when it comes to the X-Men, they have the ability to bring people back to life by making them new clone bodies, and Charles Xavier download the memories into those clone bodies. Now, of course, as soon as the dead X-Factor members are brought back to life, you basically have Charles Xavier, Eyeboy, and Prodigy tell all of them how they all die. Like, hey, you were killed off by a death goddess. And right now, she has taken over the Boneyard. So if you want to stop her, I can call in the X-Men. But of course, you have X-Factor say, no, they are going to be the ones to basically stop the Morrigan because it was her who killed them. It's their mess and they want to handle their own mess. And so, of course, you do have the X-Factor team go back to the Boneyard to actually fight against the Morrigan. Now, here's the thing. The X-Factor team is going to win because right now they're going to fight the Morrigan in a fair battle. Earlier, they were killed in their sleep, and so it was not a fair battle. But basically, Charles Xavier did warn the X-Factor team because the Boneyard does have a garden of dead bodies. Because remember, Prodigy did ask Dr. Reyes for all the dead bodies of dead X-Men characters over the time of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men work to basically study the dead bodies to learn more about the dead bodies. And so with those dead bodies being in a garden, the Morrigan had basically taken over those dead bodies and turned them into zombies. So right now the Boneyard is filled with zombies. But of course you do have the characters who are well known for fighting. So like Northstar, Polaris, Dakin, and Rachel Summers, they all go inside to fight against the army of zombies of dead bodies that Prodigy had brought to the Boneyard to study. But either way though, throughout the pages of this book, you basically have the X-Factor team kind of able to get rid of the Morrigan, but just temporarily to bring back Siren. Because remember, the Morrigan does need a host, and that host was Siren. But with the Morrigan temporarily gone, it does give the X-Factor team the ability to actually talk to Siren to figure out what kind of bargain did she make with the Morrigan, because that bargain could be the reason why the Morrigan is here on Krakoa and keeps trying to take over the body of Siren. Now, when we jump into X-Force number 9, yes, we're going to go ahead and do X-Force number 9. I know at the very beginning I did say only X-Force number 7 and 8, but of course I feel like let's go ahead and throw in X-Force number 9 to go ahead and get rid of it, because basically the next and final issue of X-Force is honestly a tie-in to the Hellfire Gala event. Now, with that being said, we actually do go at X-Factor right now, using the powers of Rachel Summers to kind of read the mind of Siren, to hopefully figure out what in the world happened when it came to her and also the Morrigan. Now, of course, while you have inside the mind of Siren, here comes the big problem. they can't go deeper into her mind. Like basically the Morrigan had put up some kind of barriers in the mind of Siren to block certain memories so that X Factor cannot access those memories. Now there is a way around it, but of course it's a very difficult task to get around those different barriers. Now with all that information being said, of course Rachel Summers does have a plan to learn more on how in the world the Morrigan was able to make a bargain with Siren. And what Rachel Summers wants to do is basically throw all our characters of X Factor, except Polaris, into the mind of the Morrigan. Because what you have Rachel Summers say is that basically there is a way around the barrier that the Morrigan have put up. But of course, to go around this barrier, you're going to have to go through the mind of the Morrigan instead. And so you basically have Rachel Summers use her powers to baseball pitch basically Dakin, iBoy, Prodigy, and Northstar into the mind of the Morrigan to hopefully learn how in the world the Morrigan was able to make some kind of deal with Siren. Now, once they're actually able to read the mind of the Morrigan, you basically have the mind of the Morrigan begin to tell our heroes what is the key to actually defeating the Morrigan. And basically, they need the character known as Shatterstar. Now, Shatterstar is actually an old-time X-Men character. But here's the thing. Shatterstar is right now locked away in the Mojoverse. And remember, the Mojoverse is basically a dimension where you basically have the people of the Mojoverse just love television. They love everything being televised. Now, with that being said, basically right now, X Factor has been banned from the Mojoverse because remember, earlier they went to the Mojoverse to save Wind Dancer. But when they did that, of course, they did cause a lot of problems. But either way, they have no choice but to have to go back to Mojoverse to save Shatterstar. And so it's Northstar asking Prodigy, does he have a way to actually get them back into Mojoverse? Because again, they have been officially banned from there. Now, basically what happened is you basically have X Factor use Dazzler to put on a show for the Mojoverse. Because remember, when it comes to Dazzler, Dazzler is one of the old X-Men characters fans used to love in the early 1980s, had her own book as well. But either way, when it comes to Dazzler right now, you basically have Dazzler right now throwing a concert for the Mojoverse to basically give X Factor away to kind of get someone else in there to threaten Mojo to release Shatterstar. And of course, that person is Magic and Danny Moonstar. And so while you have Dazzler throwing a cold concert, well, behind the scenes, you have Magic and also Danny Moonstar tell Mojo to release Shatterstar back to the hands of X Factor and X-Men, which of course he does do that. Now, this is actually the moment where we basically kind of learn why you have Siren kind of stuck with the Morrigan. And basically what you have the memories of the Morrigan and Siren tell us is that basically the Morrigan wanted to kill 1,000 mutants. It wanted a huge mass murder scene as a way to kind of please itself. Now, of course, it wanted to kill 1,000 mutants. And Siren did not want that to happen. The death of 1,000 people, because that could possibly put in play the idea of the 5 also being wiped out in that 1,000 death, which could mean that the mutants no longer have a way to bring back people if they die. And so what Siren did instead was she basically offered herself to die for the Morrigan 1,000 times, but 1,000 different ways. And so basically that explains why she has been dying over and over again in the earlier X Factor books, because she made that promise to basically save 1,000 mutants' lives. But then we actually pick up with the death of the Morrigan, because she does die by the hands of Shatterstar. Now, basically, we're not actually told how in the world Shatterstar was able to kill the Morrigan. All we do know is that basically he's part of some kind of ritual or some prophecy, And so, of course, with him being able to fulfill that prophecy, the Morrigan died. But the problem is, though, right after he does kill her, some kind of substance comes out of her, goes through Shadowstar's heart, and it goes through another character who, of course, seems very close to Shadowstar. And so with that, basically, we're kind of left to wonder what was that substance that's right now connecting Shadowstar to another male character, the possibility of a lover. But of course, we're not told about that in this book. That gets saved for the final issue of X Factor, which is X Factor number 10. So with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. And if you do, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.